that one? The huge one on your forehead says kid. Is it that one? Is that the one you're talking about? Is it?
Watch my necklines disappear in 2 months using Glove microinfusion system. Don't get lasers until you watch this.
Memento, the AI biography people don't understand about addiction, which is actually the reason why I decline most invitations to speak about the topic. Because that people think that addiction has to do with drugs and alcohol, and it has really very, very little to do with drugs and alcohol. First of all, there are other addictions. People become addicted to behaviors or to
Sarah, nice to meet you. I always try not to spread stuff everywhere, but I definitely know this. I'm the person, I just want to do it. Sorry, I'm sometimes I started on the. Myself, so. My hair, them, everybody. I can't remember who did it. We were doing a PowerPoint presentation. It was a very contentious issue. And every other slide was a picture of the person's dog. I know this is gonna be hard, so I'm gonna make this easier for all of us. It was like contentious, and I was like, and y'all remember my dog? It's got a frisbee and the dog, you know. That's kind of amazing. That's a good way to do it. I thought it was pretty good. So, we got
Oh, you're gonna be wearing those glasses? I was, but I'm afraid that I'm too to actually read anything I write.
details.
Readers, so.
They're just lovely. And your readers slip underneath.
They might be.
Innovative solutions for Michelle.
Right? So this could be it. I got a lot.
It's a lot of people. I think we'll do that early, so.
I think you found a new market. I'm good for it.
It's like things that can put this on my face. Somebody
See that, that's the actual thing.
Wild and I fly on.
Yeah.
Right. It's a little after 9 o'clock. Good morning, everybody. Are we ready to go, Parker?
Yes, I believe we are.
All right, great. I guess we're gonna start over here with Gail and to introduce yourself.
Gail is now back on the Housing Commission after a little time off, and I live in Way, South County, and I'm also a member of the Tillamook County Planning Commission.
I am Sarah Dental and I am a member of the Housing Commission.
I'm Dave Bennett, South County Representative, and I joined the commission when Gail stepped off, thinking I was going to replace her. Now that she's back. Glad to have you.
I'm Marlisa De Jesus, representing the Houseless Action Network.
I'm anonymous. I'm Nan Devlin, with Executive Director for the Tillamook Coast Visitors Association, and I might be the newest member.
You?
of the Commission. Hope to join.
Mark Kessler, North County Rep, Encinitas.
Carrie Fleischer, member at large.
Erin Scarlett, Tillamook County Commissioner and Liaison to this group.
Kristen Cupdick, member at large, based in Rockaway.
Heidi Rosgraf, contractor from South County, member at large.
Rich Brackey, bigger idea, random.
Michelle Yang, large employer representative.
Parker Sammons, the Tillamook County Housing Coordinator.
And if you see some members online, Friar, do you want to introduce yourself?
Briar Smith, Tillamook County Habitat for Humanity, and I'm a member at large.
Good morning, Chris.
Chris Wilkes, member at large.
And do you see any other commissioners? And then Paul Fournier, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Paul Fournier, Commissioner-elect.
Great, thank you. And there's somebody on the phone if you'd like to introduce yourself.
And Lydia.
Okay. Real go.
Lydia.
Is there anybody else online that would like to introduce themselves?
Hi, I'm Lydia Ivanovich. I'm the programs manager with Columbia Pacific Economic Development District.
Great, thank you for joining us. All right, I'm gonna pass it off for Mark.
Okay, time for the mission minute. Are there updates of interesting, exciting things happening?
Well, I have a couple.
Oh.
Tuesday, October, what month am I in? December 10th. Helping Hands is doing their ribbon cutting for the second floor. So that will be adding like double the amount of beds they currently have. So it's very exciting, big win for them and all of us, the community. So, yeah, great.
I actually had one, I was at the Manzanita City Council meeting last night, and they are approving a restrictive covenant on the affordable housing land, the 12 acres that we gave money toward for affordable housing. But this is preparatory to annexation of this property because the city wanted to make sure that all the i's were dotted, t's crossed. So it will remain affordable housing in perpetuity. And apparently that is somewhat complicated because, I mean, you have two generous developers, Mr. Pence and Hinks, and they are giving, well, not giving, they're creating this land to be restricted to affordable housing, which, as the city manager said, lowers the value of that property forever. So it's a very nice thing to do, but the lawyers really want to make sure it's right. So it will be, I think they're not going to do income verification. They'll do an affidavit saying that this will be low, AMI in a certain range tied to the state of Oregon. So if AMI changes over the decades, it won't have to be revisited. So that was an interesting for me behind the scenes of how this stuff goes slowly because they're plunking along, but this is a good point.
Yeah, if I can add.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, they've been having that conversation for a while now. And one of the important things to understand about like how difficult it is to get housing is just because this land now is deeded to be affordable and low income housing. It does lower the value of the land, which is good because it guarantees that the land will be used for that type of housing. But at the same time, as we've learned more about these funding stacks and development pro formas, it does make it sometimes harder to get things like the workforce housing projects that don't have that big financial assistance and a low income housing tax credit to get built, because when they look at the overall value, once it has been built, it's now lower, which means that it's harder to get a loan for that because the product at the end, what you're eventually borrowing against, is now worth a little less. So it just is a really good thing to have in your mind that these projects, even if we have the land deeded for it, they still need that public assistance lift to go. So just to keep that in mind. And it is really impressive what they're doing with deed restricting that land. And I believe that the city of Manzanita made part of the zoning changes that they were going to do for that land contingent on this. And so it's very much a nice agreement and cooperation example.
And they're going to, it was announced that the planning commission will be hearing, I assume, the affordable housing project we funded at their February planning commission meeting.
Wonderful.
So that's,
All right, seeing that there's no public in the room, is there any public online that would like to make comment?
No, I'm just happy to be here again and I appreciate what you guys are trying to do and hopefully I can contribute soon.
Great.
Carrie, I have to leave at 9:45 because I have a dentist appointment at the
Sure.
end. And if I don't make that, I can't get in for 3 months.
Need to do.
So, I'm not mad or anything.
I had a mission that I wanted to share too. We've been talking a lot about pre-leasing in here, and we started to get our first letters of intent to pre-lease signed. And The first one came from the creamery, and that has kind of kicked off a domino effect of more coming in. And I'll be going back to the school district soon to talk with them about their needs and how they could get involved in some of the projects that are active. So that's my mission there.
In acquiring those, are those open for anybody that's working on a development for workforce housing?
That's a good question. I will investigate. Because it should be able to use demand. Well, I mean, we could in some way parlay it into a demonstration of demand in the community. I'll look into how that would work. Get back to you. Thanks.
All right, is there anybody else online that would like to make public comment? All right, well, hearing none, next thing is we have on the agenda is a bylaw review. Before you is a revision of the bylaws that was passed by this commission in 2022. And in our bylaws, it states that every 2 years that we do officially review that for any changes or updates. This is supposed to be a fluid document. So we have this here for you to review and I'm thinking we'll probably give you a month or maybe even 2 to digest this document and read through it. So, because I think our January meeting is pretty full.
Yeah.
So I would think we want to bring this back to our February
Yeah.
meeting. So I just wanted to, at this time, say that it is an open document that we need to formally update. So if there's any initial comments today, Parker would be happy to take notes on any proposed changes. But if you need time to review that document, please take the time to do so, and we'll bring it back for any suggested edits or changes at the February meeting. And to finally, hopefully, wrap that up into a final document and take action on any amendments.
Yeah, and to that, there are 2 current housing commissioners who need to be reconfirmed, and that is you and Michelle. So unless I hear from you guys otherwise, we will get a reappointment letter from the commissioners this month.
And well. And so, according to our bylaws, in section, that would be 6, it's officers. And so both our vice chair and chair positions are good for 1 year. And at our December meeting by a voice vote or written ballot, we are to elect our chair and vice chair for the upcoming 2025 year. And so this is the time in which we are going to take nominations for the chair position and then the vice chair position. Do that now.
You guys want to keep doing it?
I'm more than willing to keep doing
Anyone else want to be vice chair?
it. So it's,
So
so I
would you
would
like to
invite
move
a
to-
motion.
Yeah, I motion to have Carrie or step in or stay in as the chair and Mark stay in as the vice chair. I would second that.
Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand online or say aye. And anybody against? Hearing none, motion passes.
Congratulations.
Thanks, everybody.
It's fun.
And now I'm gonna pass this over to Parker and Frank.
So one of the items in our bylaw is committees. It is section 12, Roman numeral 12. It says the commission may opt to designate small committees as it deems appropriate. I would like to request the formation of a new committee. This will be, I do not know if this will be an ad hoc or if it'll be enduring. It's hard to say until we get there and get this group assembled. But I would like to propose the formation of a nonprofit or nonprofit development committee, specifically to handle funds that are very specifically geared towards below 80% AMI construction. We have funds such as the EPA incoming eventually. And as I've learned more about Davis Bacon, prevailing wage, the intricacies and difficulties of nonprofit housing development, I've come to see that I need some sort of council of experts to help me and help this commission kind of elevate our understanding of how that type of development works, and for them to be a committee to help me go and seek the most appropriate funding that is available out there for those that level of development. We have some really great people both in our community and already on some of our committees that I intend to tap for this. Some of the members of the attendants of the development committee, including Thomas Kemper and whatnot, these are either nonprofit or nonprofit adjacent developers. And again, really needing that kind of specific knowledge and lens to view some of my work through, I think will really help that element of construction and development in our community. So I'd like to ask Breyer to be the chair of this committee, as she is a nonprofit developer of sorts. And it's my intention to also specifically be able to find better ways to help groups such as Habitat in our community that are already doing this work. So that's my little pitch for I do not know what to call it. If anybody has a better name than the Nonprofit Development Committee, I know that we already have a development committee. So that's kind of my pitch, and I leave it to you to discuss and share your thoughts.
Well, just the nonprofit housing subcommittee.
Yeah, I like
There we
that.
go.
Yeah,
Just eliminate the term development from there, because then it'll be open to just support housing, nonprofit housing.
Yeah, because Sammy's Place might be another example,
Exactly.
yes,
and we are supporting that project.
yes, that's a great example.
So I think we should probably at least entertain a motion to approve the formation of the committee, just so we have it on record. So I will move that we create a nonprofit housing subcommittee.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Hearing none, motion passes. So go forth and do good work. We hope to see upcoming reports.
Yeah, no, we'll add it to the report outs, and I expect this committee to be up and running by February and March.
Great.
Would that committee be involved with community land trusts?
Yeah, that would be where we would probably land something like that. You know, in my mind, if I was going to take, let's say, the raw property as an example, as the development committee helps guide through the process of getting that to pre-development. Once we get our restrictions in place, once we get to the place where we'd be trying to find the actual developers, that's where that group would come in and find the best nonprofit developer to use the available resources, land, et cetera, to get the best housing. But that would be kind of the way I describe it. Or supported would probably be a better word. Breyer, are you okay chairing this committee? Probably get confirmation.
Please.
I know that we've had a little bit of a side conversation about it, but yeah.
I love how you were like, I intend on asking Briar to chair it. Cheers. I definitely am eager to participate for sure. And I'm sure I can talk to you more about what chairing looks like.
Awesome.
Great.
Wonderful.
And then next on our agenda is HNA consultation.
Yeah, which I'm not seeing our consultants having joined. I've checked in with them this week. So failing that, and I will.
Pretty fast.
We are moving pretty fast.
Just suggesting we're moving pretty fast.
That is very true.
We
Those
were
were,
maybe expecting to be here. 45 minutes. Probably have to leave early. Would it be possible to move our committee reports up to?
We
Absolutely.
Go ahead and
yeah,
Let's do that.
let's push the H&A to the bottom until we see if they show up.
So do we want to just start with the committees or do you want to do the HPSF organization?
Sure. Well, the Housing Production Solutions Fund update is that we have several applications in, that are completed and just a few out there that are not. But I'm, getting questions and sorting through the details of that. We do have one question out there that I was hoping to get the commission's opinion on. Sammy's Place has contacted me, the consultants for that project, and asked if they would be able to or be eligible for applying. But they are a home ownership. Their goal is home ownership, but it is in the AMI restrictions and structure of our framework. And it's a different model than what we've looked at before. But it is restricted to below 80%, but for home ownership opportunities. And it is also 50% of their units will be held aside for adults with intellectual disabilities, is my understanding. So I don't know what kind of ask they would make of us for this round of applications, but the way that we approved our framework, we did not make it so that this would be specifically unallowed. We were really focused on the AMI restriction, the income levels of the people living in the units. I also don't know if this is an opportunity where people would be purchasing these units and then rent restricting them as a rental or not. But their goal is to develop them half set aside for the rental and ownership opportunities. So yeah, I just want to make sure that everybody's comfortable with that. We haven't entertained an application that was not explicitly for rental by a group that would be pushing it into the rental management category. So before I tell them to come and apply, I don't want there to be any ambiguity here. So that's kind of the question, is that I could see nothing. I just want to make sure that there's nobody else who sees that kind of slight divergence from what we've done so far as an issue.
This feels really exciting to me, and I can tell you, just looking in front of the bylaws and seeing the collaboratively advocate for attainable and equitable solutions that impact Tillamook County's greatest housing need, like that right there, like nails it. Like that is a creative solution to how do we have this be like a long-term sustainable housing solution, and homeownership absolutely is one of those ways.
Yeah.
Plus, I think the major reason that we haven't focused on any home ownership opportunities is because we couldn't figure out how to do it yet. That they're remaining under an affordable kind of rubric.
Right.
Whereas for apartments, we know how to do that. So if we can get another group that works that way automatically, why not? That would be fantastic.
And to that point, I think there will be increasing opportunities for supported home ownership. The state is doing a lot, and I've been watching the rulemaking for some of the supportive funds for affordable home ownership. So this will be a greater part of the pie that we look at. I think the reason that I really wanted to explicitly seek approval is that we changed it from the multifamily rental housing fund last year. And so I wanted to make sure that it didn't seem like we had changed the rules without having a conversation explicitly about that as we did that name change and we did our framework. So that's why I wanted to call it up specifically.
Just on that note, we've been talking about ADUs a lot, and whether or not eventually the Housing Production Solutions Fund could support construction of ADUs, but those are not multifamily. So that's another thing that we need to look at next year, but that's something that many of us are in support of opening up. Sorry, Gail.
No, that's okay. I don't have a problem with this, but just something you said in passing made me wonder if some of the concern isn't that it's home ownership, but that it's home ownership by perhaps an agency that will then subsequently do rent control.
Yeah, so the restrictions they already have in place, because they have a lift grant, is that they are capped at 80% AMI no matter what happens, but their grant really is for home ownership. If I don't want to speculate too much on what their model is, but knowing that half of these units are reserved for adults with, who need some special housing, I anticipate that it'll be families purchasing a couple of these to live near or with or supportive in some way. But again, that's me speculating, so I want to be clear on that. But that's kind of how I see that, is making sure that anybody who purchases and rents these is rent controlled in the same way that all of our projects are.
Well, sometimes when you're dealing with somebody that like, has like received services through like developmental services, there's like a rep payee and there's different like funds are handled in different ways. So that would be my one question, is kind of understanding some of like, how does that work when funds, like if there's somebody that's managing funds to be able to help support that person, what does that look like? So, but I think that it's a wonderful cause to be able to like get stable housing for people.
Well, we'll certainly, have them here and be asking some questions. Shane, if they're consultant, he's a great guy, and we'll probably be able to answer all of those questions when we see them in January. And a reminder, our next meeting is January 14th. It is a special meeting of the Housing Commission. And just that we will not be meeting January 2nd for holiday reasons. And that will be our extended meeting, which will be hearing all of the presentations from the latest round of applications. So again, no meeting on January 2nd, meeting on January 14th. And the Finance Committee is having a special meeting early in January, once all of the applications have come in. Again, it's open until December 31st. We'll have our special meeting. We will perform our financial quantitative evaluation, and we'll be able to include that in your packets for the presentation.
I did have one more procedure, or the application for this year's grants that we sent out on social media. Did that limit to rental? Did it have, because it prioritizes, there's something about rental in there. I just want to make sure that we're following what with that PR piece that we sent out to invite application. Do you remember if it was vague enough?
I'll dig.
I'm
I
sure it says
actually,
something about rental, but I don't know if it.
I actually deleted the bit about rental in anticipation of this conversation when we put that out, because I went and checked it. Yeah. So I don't think we put out anything that says this is for rental only, but I'll dig through and make sure that we are. That's a great thing. I'll dig through all the outreach we've done on this round and make sure that it's all square.
And we can then tell people who ask.
Yeah.
It can be for affordable housing.
Yeah.
And that, I guess in that regard, it's still a development more than 1 or 2 units. So
Three remains our minimum.
Okay. Thank you.
And it would be money going to the developer, right? Not the individual property purchaser?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yes, going towards production. Only, not going towards purchasing. I got confirmation that our consultants will be here at 9:45, which was pretty much our schedule. Yes.
So Development Committee report.
Oh, that's me. Jackie Reiser has resigned from the Housing Commission. So that is why I'm giving this report. Her and her family are moving out of the area, fortunately. Yeah. So Development Committee this month was a little bit more procedural, talking about how we are going to go forward. And Heidi, do you have anything to add to the Development Committee before I pull up my notes here quickly? That's right, yeah.
Discussed meeting time.
Did
A little bit of day. Some of the stuff we passed. So.
Yeah, little few brownfield updates. Those include that the geotech report was completed for the 3rd Street brownfield, and that project seems to be moving forward. So.
Great. Yeah.
The other was that the McRae property, the paintbrush handle factory, looks like it has two kind of major paths that they're looking at for going forward. One is working with the school districts and the community college for a career educational training program. The other is they've been in conversations with a member of or an attendant of the development committee, Derek Aragon, who is a modular home building specialist. And he has kind of outlined what it would take for that facility to become a full modular home building facility. And just for your own education, I learned through this that most modular home building facilities need an incredibly flat, smooth floor, 10 out of 10. And theirs is 6 or 7 out of 10. It also generally needs a gantry crane, so a center mast crane through a facility to be able to move large objects for the component building. But Derek has gone through and said, that's only one style of modular home building, and that there are as many others you can do. So he's kind of talked to them, and these I'm paraphrasing some conversations, but very cool designs where you're more building walls and pieces of a home than a full module. And their facility would be very well suited for that. And one of the other things that continues to impress me about the idea of having some sort of indoor housing production here, and Briar, please jump in if you would like, but an interesting component is that Habitat has all these wonderful volunteers who work on actual house builds. And volunteers aren't super into working in December in the rain outdoors. And if we had some sort of space that was available for a group like Habitat to continue to do home building operations through the winter, that we'd be really capitalizing and utilizing that wonderful volunteer element that's out there. So no matter what happens to the brownfield property with McRae's, I'm going to continue to try and find a space where home development can be done inside for organizations like Habitat through the winters.
I see that as being an opportunity to merge those two different roads that you had. Like you were talking about the development of the walls and everything, and then the students that go to the college and the schools, like there's some good work.
Yes. Yeah, if we can hit.
Put them all under one roof and.
Yeah, that's a triple, if not, yeah, well, go ahead, Brad.
It definitely would be an amazing thing for the community for sure and increase our.
It really would. Pretty cool.
So that's something I'll continue to look for at that property and beyond. And just something to have it all in your minds if you see an opportunity for something like that. So I think that's my development committee report.
All right, looks like I'm next on the legislative committee. We had a brief meeting last month, and the governors just released her ask list for the next biennium or the next legislative cycle. And I did want to call out that there are funding. She's earmarked or is asking for funding for infrastructure for both low and moderate income. So hopefully we can tap some of those funds here in our county, as well as housing from homeless to middle income was also still one of her priorities. And so there will be some, hopefully some good movement there that we are going to be trying to advocate for our commissioners and other bodies. So I'm looking forward to the legislative session starting in January. So we're going to be on tap to try to keep you all updated on what's happening in Salem.
And to that end, one of the results of some of the letters we've sent out is that Representative Javadi has asked for a meeting with me for next Friday. And so we'll be meeting. So if anybody has any thoughts or opinions that you'd like to be shared, I will read them.
I will also be meeting with him, so please let me know what you say so we don't.
Yeah. When are you meeting?
And also
Friday.
Okay.
the legislative meeting, we did move it up to December 11th. So next week, next Wednesday, just due to the holiday crunch. So we are meeting a week early this month. So if anybody would like to join us. Finance. Thanks.
Okay, so we're kind of on standby, anxiously waiting for those applications to come in for the Housing Solutions Fund. You know, I think this year we'll be grappling with a couple of issues that we may not have had previously. One is, what's an appropriate profit for a developer to have in their budget, developer's profit? And secondly, what's an appropriate amount of developer equity or developer investment that's appropriate for a project? We may be looking, for example, at a project that has budgeted a large developer's profit, but no particular developer's investment in the project. And so those are a couple of things we need to talk about. The third thing is that with regard to the Solutions Fund, I suspect that it may be appropriate for at least a portion of that fund to be used for the raw property development. And you might argue that that raw property, in terms of housing production, ought to have a pretty high priority. And I can imagine that there's going to be funding needs for that to bring it forward as quickly as possible. And I'm wondering if some of that Housing Solutions Fund ought to be earmarked for that. And so we might want to have that conversation as well before we start allocating funds to particular developers.
Can I ask a question generally of everybody, specifically probably of Commissioner Carr? What would be the appropriate way for the county or the city or an entity for the, if the raw property was something that wanted to be looked at to apply for our fund in Dave's scenario?
Good question. We haven't really addressed that. We've just generally, like we're doing the wetlands assessment, we've pulled that out of the housing money before the amount was allocated to the housing fund.
Right.
So I mean, it has been done as or I guess the county's ability to do that as we see reasonable and necessary steps moving forward. So far, I think it was at 25,000 for the wetlands or for the.
Yeah, 20, and then
Water
there's
feasibility.
contingencies that it might go up to 29, I believe, is the cap on their budget. I have that right here.
So we pulled that off the top. I guess I'm thinking of the transient lodging tax as another example where essentially if it is a county project, the county pulls funds from that to do that work as needed. We don't go through any sort of an application fund. So if you're not a county, you go through NAN and apply for those funds typically. But if you are the county ourselves, it's money we've collected and we make that decision. So Parker, in this case, has been working with you all as well on the raw property and what comes next, but that was pulled off the top. So I think that is more likely the way that it would go. But these are recommendations coming from Sarah and Parker, which theoretically are coming with this committee's blessing.
And I would say, Dave, to your point, we won't, the way we evaluate, we would want the raw property to have something like the feasibility study that we are doing in place to be able to specify what the money is for. And so I think that we're already, this project is so young that this is one where we'd look and be like, come back next year. Because that's where I think this project is at. So once we have this feasibility study, once we have a little more support, once we have people lined up to kind of the entities that we would know where this would go and how it would support. I think next year we'll be looking at something like that, a bigger ask for the raw property. So I don't think it's relevant for this round, but I do think it will be relevant in the future.
Well, and I think the other thing is that certainly the vision of the commissioners when they purchase the property is not that the county will be developing housing. It is that the county will get it developer ready.
Yeah.
And then we'll put it up essentially for sale for housing development. It is not our goal to be housing developers or housing owners. But it is our goal to get it developer ready, which includes figuring out if there is a wastewater treatment system that can be done, because our original plan had been to wait for sewer. And certainly what we've all learned about the timeline for that at this point, you know, there's been a desire to see if there is a more expeditious approach. There's some zoning changes that have to be made to the property. If you, I don't know how much we talked about it here, but it doesn't actually have appropriate zoning at all. So that has to be changed. And that was something the county will be working toward before we put it up for sale. What else do we have to do to get, well, ideally we would work on, as Manzanita was doing, with some form of deed restriction before we would put it up for sale. So I think there is a sort of a pre-development process that we have envisioned, and I will say that we have it all written out and finalized in any way, shape, or form. Parker's taking those first steps with that wastewater assessment feasibility study to see if, you know, if that direction is the right first steps or not. So I don't think we're ready for one, but two, really that fund is for development. And I don't see the county being the developer. I see us getting it ready. And again, I see that probably coming off the top of the fund in small chunks as needed, like we're doing a feasibility study. If there are legal fees required to get a deed restriction on it, we have to hire a land use attorney, because I don't expect that the county attorney is gonna have the expertise to do that. That would probably come out of that fund as well.
And also there are other better funding sources for this right now. For example, Business Oregon has a $3 million fund that can do $100,000 worth of planning for projects like this. The state is expanding what OHCS will be supporting. And so I think that there's a lot of opportunities for us to go out and get state and even federal funding for this before we start dipping into our pockets. But there will come a time where there's probably going to be some expense that will be needed to get this over the line, and we'll be ready. It's kind of my hope.
Who's going to kind of drive this project forward, the raw property forward?
Right now,
Who's got time in their agenda to do this? That's a big job.
well, so I've been working really hard to get the members on the development committee that I need for that committee to be the steering committee of this. And it's one of the reasons I've worked to really expand that committee, bring in lots of participants, lots of opinions. But yeah, that is where I intend to seek the greatest amount of steering to get this going forward. Yeah.
Okay.
We do have our agreement in place and everything's been approved for the feasibility study. Have this. So as of last week, we now have a contract with Biohabitats, and Biohabitats will start in this month on the feasibility study, and we should have a carrying capacity report, and attached with it should be the innovation options. One of the reasons why Biohabitats was the correct people for this is that they specialize in reducing the overall wastewater needs through innovation. So from there, we'll hopefully have an idea of where else we can seek funding, because DEQ is pushing for more water innovation solutions, and they are looking for like demonstration projects. So I'm hoping that this can be one of those. But it takes time and it's moves slow.
And that is really the driving force, because if we come out of the study and they say, you need to wait for sewer, then this becomes a project for which we need to wait for sewer. And any additional work is likely to be set aside. If they come back and tell us there's not an innovative strategy that's going to work for you here, or that innovative strategy is $25 million in 10 years, in which case we're in the same timeline as sewer and equally expensive. So I think that, that's going to be the next decision point on this, as to whether or not there is even a path forward short of waiting for sewer. And once we know if there is a path forward short of waiting for sewer, then we can actually create some sort of a plan toward where we'd like to be. But we just don't even know that yet. And so it's exciting and it's hopeful. And we will be working at it. And for now, we got to figure out step one.
Yep, but I continue to plan for, options and whatnot, because once we get the report, we have to figure out how to pay for the sanitation system out there. And that is going to be a huge amount of money.
Yes.
So looking at all of the ways that other places around the country have financed things like that, there's some great tax incremental financing options that could potentially make this an easy pill to swallow. But until we know how many housing units we can get on there, it's all kind of moot. So we are on the right track. We'll have this report in January. We'll revisit this in February at this meeting, and hopefully the development committee will be moving towards our next steps and recommendations at that point.
It'd be great to see a list of the challenges and the questions that need to be answered before we can make this property marketable or attractive to a developer. And of course, for the right price, a developer will come in and will fund its own wastewater system. It doesn't need to be the county.
It would end up being market rate housing though, if that were the case.
Not necessarily, that's what the land comes from. And the county's basis in that land is very low.
Yeah, and I
That's what
want
you
to put
said.
in a plug for it, because the initial cost was so low. It's really a perfect opportunity for a community land trust of some kind, at least in part of the land.
So I will share, this property was for sale for 2 or 3 years prior to the county purchasing it, with the intent of a developer buying it and doing exactly what we're talking about. And the fact that it sat on the market for 2 or 3 years indicates to us that it is not financially feasible for a developer to do that. And they could have come in and made the very same property offer that we did, but nobody had even looked at it or made an offer prior to the county doing so. So I guess I would say, Dave, you might be right, but that's not been the experience on this particular piece of property. It's that waiting. So I think the developers seek certainty. And what they don't have currently in this property for certainty includes the wastewater treatment. It also includes zoning. There is no appropriate underlying zoning, and I don't understand zoning. If Sarah were here, she could explain it inside out and backwards. This has simply an overlay of planned unit development, but there is no underlying zoning that supports residential development. So it's actually a mismatch at the moment, if I understand correctly, where it doesn't actually meet Oregon land use law until such time as it gets fixed. I mean, do you know more than I do?
Well, the issue is that without water and sewer, all you can do is like anywhere, it's like 2-acre plots with or whatever the size of the lot you need for a septic.
Right, but it can't be broken up into any other residential lots, et cetera. So there are these pieces to do. And so I know that one's on Sarah's list for the coming year. So what I would ask of the Housing Commission is I understand your interest and your desire to like make this happen. Please let the county move at the speed of the county for a few months here and get the things that we know we have to do as the county done. And we'll bring it back to you for conversation when we know a little bit more about it. But at this point, Parker, Sarah, myself, we're on this one and moving it forward. We got to do our fact finding at the county for this before we can bring it forward to you all and say, what do you think we should do?
And once we know what's possible, Dave, it could be the situation you're describing where we might just get this report and some developers like, oh, wow, you could do how many housing? Like, I'll just buy it right now. And
Right.
that might be it.
Take away the uncertainty.
Yeah.
Well, I think that speaks to a huge piece of housing, like the development of housing, is that the uncertainties are really, really hard. And they take a lot of due diligence to be able to go in, which is outside of the realm of most like real estate timelines, right? Most people want to be able to come in and have the owner have all of the information already before them, to be able to like share that information. I have, so having people like having to do the work beforehand is a really important piece of being able to move things forward. But it does speak to the huge barrier within some of the land within this community of like, how do you move it forward? There's a lot of land, but it has all of these different barriers that are on there, so.
Love to see a list of all the questions.
Yeah, Dave, what I would do,
Maybe develop.
We may be able to help with that.
I think what I'll do is, I will create a Gantt chart for this property. And I will, as part of the development committee update, share that Gantt chart, how it evolves and where we have moved, every meeting going forward. So it'll be part of the development committee report every month.
What is it?
Timeline.
A timeline chart.
The different.
Yeah, yeah. I'll show you, Kristen. You've seen them. You'll understand right away. I want to make sure that Michelle.
See the speakers here, but I'll just really briefly give you our outreach and education committee meeting update. We spent a fair bit of the meeting reviewing ways that we could continue to push and amplify our PR around the Housing Production Solutions Fund application and implemented those. We did talk a little bit about the desire and the need to have all of this information. Part of it is in Spanish now, but it's not particularly useful because it isn't all in Spanish. And so we want to create a path for next year's fund potentially that people that are primarily Spanish speaking could apply.
I think the issue was we did get all of the framework and application material in Spanish. Did not plan far enough ahead to have some of our outreach material
thank
to
you.
make
Sorry
sure
for-
that it was also translated
Yeah.
and ready to go. So next year, going to be a little bit further ahead and make sure that that translation work is also included at the prep.
So if anybody knows anybody that wants to provide some pro bono translation, let us know about that too. And then we're continuing to highlight and spotlight projects that have been previously funded to show the progress. So we just shared the piece about Lisa Greiner. We've got some more coming. Bay
Which
City.
was our most successful social media post of
I'm
all time.
not surprised. Yeah, well, especially when you've got somebody that's such a high profile community member.
Yeah.
She's on the radio every day, so that's good. We want to leverage that. Then the last thing we talked about several other things, but one of the more prominent topics was the member bios. We talked about this at the last meeting. We developed a template that will a survey form that'll come out to all of you with a request that you complete the survey and return it with your desired profile image that we can feature in two ways. The information that we'll take from the form, a portion of it will go on the website to profile who you are and what your role is on the commission. And there is some more qualitative, I have to always say, qualitative data or qualitative information that we're asking you to share that's more appropriate for social media, to share kind of the why, the motivation, where you're coming from as a community member around your work as a commission member. So be watching for that. It'll be coming out here in the next, I don't know, a couple of weeks or something, or maybe.
Good December project.
Yes, okay. So please respond and don't forget to send us a photo. Thank you. Anything that I missed, any of my other committee members?
Oh, I'll come by and take a good photo if you don't too, and it'll be funny.
Or we're gonna make you wear these glasses.
Yeah. We do some food at housing.
So one of the things, is it possible with the HPSF funds? The F started funds, sorry.
Oh, come on, it's still so much better than MOFA.
Oh, it's so much better than that. So can a small amount of that be taken out to be able to like help utilize some of the like putting documents in Spanish? Like, can we take a line item of that for translation services? Oh, you did? Perfect.
I requested it of the funds and got it.
Perfect.
And small amounts like that are pretty easy to do.
Okay,
So
perfect.
there's no, I wouldn't worry about that. We're able to do what we need.
Translation do you need?
Not too much, just
No.
a few Facebook posts and whatnot.
Yeah,
Uh,
very minimal.
the hard part is boosting our Facebook posts because of the accounting challenge it presents. It's very complicated.
Can that come out of, is there space in that fund to be able to do that?
There
Like
can.
using logistics?
Yes. So our accounting doesn't like if we buy Facebook credits because then we have to account for it every time we spend it.
Use a credit card and.
I'll figure it out, but we've been so successful with our current social media and I can't imagine even hitting much more than we're reaching or what the benefit would be.
That makes me think that we should actually bring at least quarterly updates to you all about what our social media analytics are. I think that would be helpful.
That would be great.
So.
The one benefit that I see from being able to figure that out is being able to target, so you can go in and put the zip codes in to be able to target larger communities to like thinking about bringing development. You can go in and say you want this larger demographic that you're wanting to go in and be able to do some.
Yeah, and I also, as we step up our social media game, we should also be working on our LinkedIn outreach as well to reach out to more development groups. And
Is that worth having are there funds available to do like an outside marketing group that manages that? That
Michelle,
would be something.
why don't we put together a proposal for a social media budget at our next meeting?
Okay.
Does that work?
Yeah,
And we'll kind of come up.
just
I'll dig
thinking
into
ways to take things off of your plate like that,
Thank you.
like a marketing, there's companies that like.
push stuff out for us. Yeah, I think we'll come back with the proposal for the group. if That's okay.
Got a wonderful group out in Mexico City, does my marketing. They do social media, Spanish translation, all of that.
Okay, so I'll put you up for that.
And we might all individually think of our regional social media or whatever, whether could be a mimeograph, newsletter, for those of you who know what mimeograph was. Anyhow, so we all replace something. in the county, and I don't know much about Southern, but you all live there, and are we not reaching? places that
We
you
did
think-
also talk about creating an email, e-newsletter
Right.
and some year-end reporting summary, year-end review summaries. So there will be more forthcoming on all that.
Yeah, and as part of my annual review, I may present a state of housing. Commissioner, my boss, and
So what I would just remind everybody is that Parker is one person. And that Parker is not able to give us 7 days a week.
right?
And that puts him into jeopardy in county policies when he gives us more than he's supposed to. So as you have special requests and as you say, Parker, will you do this for us? Parker, will you do this? Please just remember that Parker is one person.
Right.
And that other than him, we are relying on you all as volunteers and you all already give a ton of time. So there are so many amazing and wonderful things that we could do and would love to do and would love to do yesterday. And certainly again tomorrow, but I've heard Parker say at least 3 or 4 times today, I will do that for you. I'll get that to you. And I already happen to know that Parker is already like fully prescribed for the amount of time that we have for him. So I understand the urgency. I would just ask everyone to be thoughtful as a committee, as you seek to assign Parker many, many things.
And I'm getting more able to realistically project my time. I do have a lot of day-to-day stuff that comes up. I get about 100 emails and I send.
The good news about the good work that you have all done is that Tillamook County is seen as a leader in housing across the state of Oregon, and I would suggest even beyond as a county body, which is fantastic. Working with I-Sector, and they're looking at how do they help other counties replicate the model that is Parker, right? Because it is really good work. And it also means that there's a lot of work generated for Parker on the backside.
So then there are funds available in that HSPF for an assistant for Parker? Like,
So the question is, would you rather do that or would you rather fund a developer?
Right.
So that's a great conversation for this committee to.
But it
have,
is an
right?
opportunity to look for other funding specifically for that. For instance, a marketing grant, of some kind, small, which I just wrote for the Tourism Bureau for 2 other organizations. Not that we're doing tourism, right? Find another place to do it, but there's there are marketing companies here. We're working with Short Story Marketing, which is based in Oceanside, and they do all this stuff. They do it. You pay them money and it's like, instead of getting an assistant for Parker from the county, we hire them off.
So one of the things that we do is we do hire out some of the tasks we have, and we do have one big one right now, which is our new housing.
Patiently.
And as we go through this, think about how we try to target versus the most effective place we can be. And a big part of our housing needs analysis is finding out what the place that needs us the most is. And between those 2 bits of information, we're able to make those kinds of choices. So with Carrie's permission, I'd like to invite Todd to come and talk to us. In front of you is the proposed H&A update that FCS has put out to us. Not exactly a complete final draft, but this is our chance to talk with Todd about this, and I will pass it off to him to talk about the H&A update.
Thank you, Parker. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Some of you were around the table, I believe, several years ago when we did your first countywide housing needs analysis, and it's good to see you again. Looking forward to doing another deep dive into current trends in Tillamook County and how it's impacting housing needs. And I guess congratulations. I did note that you reached a record high population level last year, this year. I know the state has kind of gone down, then up and down since the pandemic statewide. The growth within the state is pretty spotty. Central Oregon certainly leading the way. But we're beginning to see the region pick up last year within the greater Portland region. And we are seeing a lot of growth, in certain parts of the coast. Certainly some in Lane County, as well as in Lincoln County, as well as up north in Clatsop County. And so, that's good news to kind of go into this project. It's been about 8 years since we last looked at the data to do a housing needs assessment. So we will have some fresh information to do this work. And a lot of our focus this time around will really be on the demand side in terms of housing needs. I noticed that, sure, population's up a little bit, but housing prices continue to increase despite kind of lackluster growth along the coast. And I think I just looked at the last index for our housing values in Tillamook County was up to 455,000. And so that's up about 1.5% from last year. And, a lot of that's due to lack of supply, of course, cost of infrastructure, and and second home pressure as well since the pandemic. We still see that in markets. We are doing work around the country now in housing, doing some interesting projects in Nevada, in Douglas County around Lake Tahoe, where they are trying to conserve land in rural areas and transfer development into receiving zones, which, could be a model for Tillamook County down the road. Places where you do have sewer and water, basically. So there are some ideas that we might bring to the table this time around. And I do kind of see this focus as being more of a prospectus for future housing opportunities than your typical housing needs analysis. The state's kind of gone away from the traditional model of housing needs studies. The state's trying to take a more active role in housing around the Oregon, and this could be a model for the state. So, and also as a prospectus, in terms of identifying near-term housing opportunities, it could be a useful document for developers or lenders that are considering investing in Tillamook County. So we'll try to look at this more from a kind of a private development point of view than a traditional Oregon kind of top-down thou shalt plan for housing point of view.
And Todd, if I could add to that really quick, the state is doing their own housing needs analysis this upcoming year as well. And we're really, we're working with Todd to really kind of drill in on the aspects that we don't think the state's going to capture, what is very specifically unique to our community, things like second home pressure. It will be the first time the DLCD is really incorporating the second vacation homes into their housing needs. And so we're going to have our own take on it that's really, really specific to our region. And to something that Michelle brought up, we'll be asking for like a ADU kind of impact, like what sort of housing could be built if all of the ADU able houses were able to cheaply and quickly add one, and how many would? So those are kind of some of the housing needs stuff that's going to be more specific that will not be reflected in the state data, and why we're trying to take a more targeted approach that Todd's describing. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's great. Yeah, I think, Parker has a great perspective, a little different than a kind of a municipal or state kind of agency focus in terms of what might work in Tillamook County, so what do we need to focus on? How can we get the most out of remaining capacity for infrastructure, transportation, sewer, water in areas where we think that can occur? We have seen population decline actually in the city of Tillamook, which was a bit of a disappointment, but hopefully that will change in the coming years as some of these local projects get off the ground. But so we have a scope in front of you. We would come back February 6th with some preliminary information where we would start to get a handle on some of the demand trends, be able to discuss that with you at that meeting and fine tune the results quickly, I think in March, and come back with a report early spring.
Fantastic.
Open it up for questions.
Question, with regard to other counties similar in size and location, what general trends are you seeing in terms of housing demand and how best to meet those? What, as an overview, the work that you've done recently, what are you seeing?
Well, we're certainly along the coast, and whether it's in Washington or Oregon, or like I say, around lakes in Nevada, California, there's that second home demand just pushing out the local tenants and making it very difficult to find housing that that is remotely affordable. And I'm seeing that in all these markets that have that have population increases, basically along the West Coast. And what we're recommending in a lot of cases is to try to find out where the government can get involved to provide infrastructure, water, sewer, transportation, and then allow and plan for a mix of housing that would be different than what the laissez-faire approach is delivering, which is basically, basically kind of larger homes. So that's the first step, find out, how the government can work to some degree with the private sector to find these opportunity sites. In some states, like Arizona, they're trying to prioritize low-income housing tax credit opportunity sites, throughout the county. And then once they figure out, what are the top, say, 5 in each area, what can the state then do, or the county, to kind of begin to get options on some of that property, to work proactively with the property owners that, may not be developers. They might just be sitting on the property, and to try to get them to proactively develop, some of these larger 5+ acre sites, using low-income tax credits. Yeah.
If we asked for some sort of analysis on mitigation measures for second homes and vacation homes, I'm thinking like vacancy tax, second, or like closed door tax, or something like that. Would that be something we could get included in this? And is that something that this commission thinks would be valuable?
Well, we could certainly talk about a laundry list of options that, policy options that you might want to further evaluate, based on best practices, in other similar sized communities. That's no problem, kind of identifying that and kind of listing those and kind of the advantages and disadvantages of some of those innovative options. There's varying degrees of policy measures, whether it's very passive or very supportive or proactive in terms of costly to the property owners, or kind of more regulatory, which is more passive approach, where you just say, we're going to allow so many permits, for short-term occupancy and limit it that way. I know you have data finally on that, because you didn't have it 7 years ago in terms of short-term permits, I believe. So
we do have a program in place. So yeah, we could kind of look at some sort of impact study on what some of the other policies that could be enacted would yield, and what it might do to demand, et cetera.
Does the study differentiate between different types of like different intended uses for second homes. I mean, because there's a variety of reasons people engage in a second home. For some, it literally is their step to be able to engage into our community. I've had lots of clients that have stepped in slowly, started working here and being able to like have this slowly become their community. Is there any way to capture like intended use behind that, whether or not it's, I mean, like, that's such a,
I wish Nan was here because she'd probably have,
Yeah, and I just want to caution us not to get too far down the pipeline of short-term rentals.
Yeah.
Because really, that is a portion
right,
of what's happening in our community. The county has an active program managing them. The commissioners have capped them at this time.
Yeah.
So I want us to be thoughtful and cautious because we actually have a short-term rental advisory committee. That is their role is to advise the county on short-term rentals, and this is to advise the county on how to be developer ready. So I want to be thoughtful and cautious that we don't spend a lot of time and energy down that.
I agree, but I think what we're talking about here is empty second homes that are not being used as short-term rentals, and there are a lot of them. And they are creating barriers. I mean, I think we have to look at that specifically.
well, is it the demand for them that's creating the barrier?
So totally, just please be thoughtful about short-term rentals, which
Yeah,
are.
and I, don't just blanket second homes.
right. And I think that that's where I was getting at, is that the reason second homes exist isn't necessarily just because they want a short-term rent, or they want to
Yeah.
profit off of it, or they want to rent it all.
Gonna retire and live there.
Right, so that I think
Every
is
Sunday, and you see them
that
the
they're,
whole year.
in, some of my favorite engaged community members have been people that have like came here as a second home. And so like, that's the one piece that like, I hope that this, I don't know how to capture that, but being able to capture the community engagement that does come from second homes, like there is a really good section of people that come as a result of that, so.
Well, is it legal can the county or a city, say Nehalem, that's going to pass its own rules about attaching, say, extra cost? And how would it be policed? I mean, it sounds like very complex.
The county is exploring that right now, whether or not a vacancy tax is allowable for a county to enact. We don't believe currently that it is, but it is something that's being explored on a different line of work that the county is currently undertaking. So again, I just want us to be thoughtful about what this committee is here to do and be careful about bleeding over into other work. And I think second homes have an impact. Let's talk about the impact, but let's also be thoughtful about how far we go down that path. Other than how it is affecting the development that we can encourage.
And the demand.
The demand.
The other thing that we've talked about multiple times is most of these second homes are located in areas that are not conducive for any kind of affordable workforce housing. Like
No.
it's gonna be on the edge of a cliff overlooking the
That is
Pacific
a
Ocean.
chicken egg question. Way out at the gate in that, but there's no doubt that the pressure on second homes has increased those
The
prices.
prices of
So
everything.
go and
Agree
say,
with
well,
that.
it's not unaffordable. For that to be affordable housing is a circle.
I think what we're trying to get to is understanding the information so that we can make informed
Yeah.
discussions about that.
Isn't that what FCS is basically compiling all the data, so we have all that information?
So that's part of this is all the data will be out there and then these conversations could take place.
Get the data first.
Yeah, this is mostly focused on demand, and we'll certainly bring a lot of that information, we can like have factual information, right? So we look at trends and we understand that there's, certain types of housing, is needed in the near term, based on the market pressure that we see. But I always think that, just identifying some of these policy issues for further discussion will be kind of where the committee can really weigh in down the road. And, in some states, like Florida, and I'm thinking of a few others, they have homesteader property tax rates, which are different than the second home rate. They're lower for the homesteaders, people that actually live there year round. And so, maybe there's some state legislative changes that can be considered down the road, based on some of the findings here. But, I don't know what comes out of that, but yeah, our focus first phase is let's update the information, get the most current trends we can find with real data. We can grab some anecdotal findings from brokers, regarding who's buying the second homes, that kind of thing might be useful. And we certainly want to get a compilation of the development activity that's in the pipeline so that, people from outside the county understand the opportunities of investing in the county for different types of housing, as opposed to second homeowners coming in.
In regards to, I'm not just thinking income and wages, I know you'd normally do some sort of analysis. Is there gonna be any component on wage growth as well
Yeah.
as a calculation of, I don't know, a sense of real affordability, like what people actually can afford? Because I know a lot of us use the standard 30% quotient, and just, I think that 30% reality of gross income to determine the affordability sometimes I think is skewed here.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people are like, 30% of my take home is actually 50% of my gross. If they do that 30%. So I just don't know if any sort of analyses can do on what the average person is paying.
Well, we tend to look at it more from kind of the HUD perspective in terms of what's the median family income in the local area per HUD, and then what are the 30, 50, 80%, housing affordability levels that would be eligible for certain types of HUD financing and funding, and other related subsidies from grants. We can talk about it. Some communities want to further customize it and just look at, instead of HUD income levels, they want to look at a certain a local income level, which could be lower than the HUD level, to really get a true measure for what's affordable. And and we'll conclude that there's a big imbalance, I'm sure, and then the question is, well, how can we deliver, housing at $200,000 a unit when the market rate is $450? That's always the trick.
I have a couple questions. One is just on the AMI. It is really skewed in this community because of all of the retirees and other income levels that come in with these second homes or transplants. So to be able to look at the AMI of the workforce that's here, I think would be really important, and not the global AMI. And then the other thing I was gonna ask you, so I work for a hospital, but I work with a lot of employers in another capacity. And one of the things that I hear a lot from everyone, including my organization, is people aren't even following through on job opportunities because they Google housing as they're looking at where they're applying. And then they basically determine that it's not worth pursuing an opportunity to come and move here to work. So how do you measure that in terms of demand?
Yeah.
It's like what happens. It's like how many vacancies, like positions go unfilled? Like is there an algorithm for that?
No, that's a tricky one. Sorry. I recognize that that's a problem, not only in Tillamook County, but it's a problem throughout Oregon now. People, used to be able to come here and get a decent, could afford a house relative to other parts of the United States. Now, Oregon's right up there with California and Washington in terms of cost of housing. And so it's a problem I'm finding, unless you give way out in Eastern Oregon, it's a problem along the coast. So what can you do about it? I think all a government can do, since you're not going to be the developer of housing, is to work with nonprofit developers proactively to, again, one deal at a time, try to get a revenue source like, City of Newport did construction excise tax, which I know you voted down a few years back. But, try to look at some creative solutions where you can invest in infrastructure, water, sewer, and begin to focus public investment on places where, you could leverage some private development of more affordable housing. It's really the only way to get at that.
Could you expand what you said about Newport? Is there a quick, for those of us who don't remember that, or is that?
Oh, well, yeah, Newport approved a construction excise tax about, I don't know, 12 years ago, maybe. I think it's just 0.5%. So pretty small tax, for all new construction, private construction in the city. And at the same time, they revised you don't really have significant impact fees, but they revised their impact fees so that smaller, more affordable housing units pay a lot less than the larger ones. And so the two in combination created, a conducive investment environment for more multifamily housing. And they had a few, they had OSU Extension Center and some other larger investments around the port that were going on at the same time. So they ended up, I think, doing a pretty good job, I think, of focusing investment and housing development closer to the city of Newport, and less in the rural parts of the county.
Time for more questions.
Commissioners enacted that, just as history. Commissioners enacted that without a vote of the people because it was allowed by the legislature, and the community fought it tooth and nail, put it on the ballot as a ballot measure, and it lost.
And that's Tillamook.
And that's the county of Tillamook, and that was done when Commissioner Bartline was a commissioner before my time, when it first came out from the legislature. So unfortunately, the history of that particular construction excise tax in Tillamook County is not a good history. So I
wonder if we're at a different climate now, because ADUs used to be a 3-letter, 4-letter word too, and now
I'd start with talking to Logan.
Well,
Cooling led the charge against it, and very significantly. Anyway, there's a whole lot of history that goes with it. I agree, it would be interesting to know if it's a different time, but your construction, and it's Crystal, on who your construction folks would be the ones that would need to be engaged to find out if it's a different time, to find out if there is a way that they would see it as not damaging to their business, because that was certainly the message that came out, was that, you're just passing this on to your construction people and you're going to hurt the industry.
What year was it?
20.
it's pre-COVID, I feel like.
Yeah, it was, because I wasn't on the commission yet. 2016.
Well, it would be the information that they're gonna gather for us that would help us to know what that is too, because we'll see if the trend is trended way towards more construction that would be benefiting from this as opposed to paying for it, then there might be a different.
All I can say is San Diego that's building a 5,000 square foot house next to our property. I don't think the excise tax would be a barrier to them after the millions of dollars they've poured into this house.
Probably not.
So yeah, so it's certainly a conversation that could be had. I think the other is, as the biological opinion rolls forward and we see what other barriers and challenges are currently being placed in front of our construction industry and our development industry overall, there's this context in which we're operating right now that dicey as well. So perhaps in a year or so, maybe it would be a conversation to visit. I don't know.
Todd, do you have a few more minutes for a few more questions?
Sure.
Todd, as you were describing your work product, I think I heard you say that you might kind of survey the area and watch for the most likely developable sites and how we can employ our county resources to help get those sites developed. Did I hear you say that?
Well, that's a good technique, but it's outside the scope. Our focus on this is really on the demand side. but when we talk about innovative policies or best practices, we were going to highlight some of those types of policies, from that we've seen around the West or the US. And that's one of those policies is it, maybe it's part of a work plan for next year for your committee or a commission or the county to do that type of study. But I can show you kind of how it works. It doesn't take, it just takes GIS analysis. So it's fairly straightforward, but you have to look at the scoring criteria that the HUD uses when they rate a low-income housing tax credit applications, and then find the sites that optimize the score.
Question. There's some criticism of the use of the HUD criteria when it specifies a large territory like a county that is pretty diverse from one end to the other. And it averages the mean and the median for the whole county. Could you break up the county into like 3 parts as part of your analysis, like north, middle, and south, so that we could get a little finer grain of understanding of population and housing pressures?
Population is already broken down to the city level. So if we want to see population changes, that information is already available.
Yeah, but in relation to the housing pressures, prices.
It's very different in Manzanita and Escalante.
Yeah, it's really different, north, south.
Cloverdale, so.
Mhm. I think parts of the project can certainly do that, it kind of depends on what data is available. We start dissecting census tracts, the accuracy of the information gets a little suspect for smaller jurisdictions. So I don't think I necessarily want to lean on that. But when we look at things like home sales by location and, the level of demand, north, central, and south for different types of homes, we can certainly include that in the project, the study. So, yeah, I think we can partially address it. As far as the HUD, the discussion you had a few minutes ago about the HUD income level being, the AMI being probably higher than what the local experience is. We can certainly look at different income levels, different measures of income, local versus HUD, when we do our housing affordability kind of needs assessment. And, I've made a note to do that.
Because Todd, don't you look at the jobs in the county and what they pay? Isn't that part of what we looked at last time? To kind of tease that.
What we looked at was in commute statistics of workers that work in the county but live outside the county because they can't afford to live in the county. And we look at those statistics just to see, what kind of housing imbalance we have just based on the worker commute patterns, not as much as the employer wages as the commute patterns.
Like the post-COVID answer or line item for that would probably be people that live here and work outside of our community. Might be another like housing, and I don't know how you'd get to it, but I know
I looked at both last time it was like,
Oh,
we're
perfect.
like, I think we had both numbers, but yeah, that would be great.
I'd be curious how much
I
it
know,
changed.
how much has it changed?
I think
For sure.
another factor here is we have a lot of people, we're doing Christmas baskets as a volunteer thing at our work. And we selected some families. They're families of all adults living together in one instance, a trailer, a fifth wheel. And there's 3 adults. The youngest person is 38 years old. I'd like to think that maybe, other circumstances, if there were housing available, they might have different living circumstances, if they so chose. But what I think, this is my thought process more expansively on this topic, is there are a lot of people that are living in congregant dwelling scenarios that would like to be living independently and cannot afford to. And that's where this the people who are working in Tillamook County and living in Tillamook County and the wages they're making, that to me, there's a story to be teased out of that to help us understand real demand.
Yeah.
There are a lot of couch surfing kids in the school district, some estimates of 20 to 30%. Those kids are not living in a home environment that they want to be living in as a family, out of necessity, out of,
I think understanding what percentage of those, kind of situations would expand out to new housing and what are there for economic pressure regardless of the available housing too. And I'm hoping that's also what we can pull out of this report.
Yeah, we can certainly characterize some of those findings, might be anecdotal, but we'll look at the current homeless count data, houseless count data, and any statistics we can get around that as well. And then, it'll be an insatiable demand for, of course, low income housing, no doubt.
Do you use the school districts counts at all? I know that like Tillamook School District has, and all school districts, and they have a different,
McKinney-Vento.
they've got a different
Mhm.
guideline and stuff. But
Yeah.
the numbers on that are huge, so.
Yeah, because they allow for couch surfing and other, whereas the HUD count
Yeah.
does not. The school
Yeah,
district
well-
counts.
We'll look at whatever data we can get our hands on there.
The other data that I saw recently that would be interesting to our situation is those transfer payments that adult seniors are getting when they move in and they're living on pension and social security and investments. Because that actually in some cases pulls our area median income down, because what they're living on doesn't actually count as income. And I saw a study not that long ago that was looking specifically at the transfer payment impact to Tillamook County. And I think I don't know if you all are able to pull that and look at that to more to Michelle's point of teasing apart what is our actual workforce, right? Because when we remove that transfer payment conversation, you can kind of narrow yourself into your workforce, because transfer payments would also include theoretically those on disability, right? Those folks who are not part of our workforce, which leaves you then with a better snapshot of workforce.
Yeah, it's a good point. We'll certainly look at different measures of income levels for quantifying, what the true worker housing needs are. And so I'm making notes.
So that's drawing from state income tax information if you're a worker, you're paying state income.
Right, and I'm not sure where the data came from for this study. I'm sure I could probably find the study. It was one that came out of, I think it was Oregon Coast Visitors Association or something had this data. It was, can't remember where I got that report or where that report is.
Right. I'll track it down.
But it was one that they looked at the North Coast region.
Mhm.
Yeah.
The other information that's available now we can bring in is kind of where people who move into the county or move out of the county, kind of where they're going, and where they're coming from. So we'll pull that in as well.
Yeah, and I think you can see, Todd, we have a very engaged group here. So as you are looking for those anecdotal bits of information, please let me know how I can help. And we might be able to track some of that on the ground data that would be helpful to inform your report pretty quickly and more easily than you did be able to.
Yeah, no, well, I appreciate it's always been a great committee to work with, very engaged. And we'll look forward to getting started. So we'll see you again in February, I hope.
Sounds great.
All right. Thank you. Good day.
CHNA data will be have the raw data from the community health needs assessment February 4th. So we can pass that on to them if there's anything in there that they can use.
We'll have the point in time.
Yeah.
From December. And then I know that we have some more anecdotal data. I'll get them from like the school districts. They used our survey for pre-leasing. They put that out to their employees and I'll get that to them, but it did indicate that about half their employees would jump at the opportunity for teacher-specific housing through the district. So that was very interesting to hear.
You want me to run that survey? Some way to do that if I could request that.
Yeah, I thought that they were, but I will ask.
I haven't seen it.
I'll ask Eric if they did go that route. That I do know that they have signed on to commit to some of the units of the project next door, so.
Is there any action maybe to recommend this proposal or?
I think we did.
No,
that at the prior meeting, didn't we?
Yeah, and this was us just having a chance to mold what we want a little bit before we finalize it. But I will be taking this for approval to the commissioners.
So this isn't this isn't being paid for out of the state money that Tillamook County got as a grant.
No, I believe this is,
Who's paying for this?
I believe this is Fund 122.
That's what I.
This is part of our mandate to perform this H&A every few years.
Is this the same company that did the last one? Okay.
So they'll be largely updating in
Nice.
a lot of ways. So it'll be a less expensive report than the first one.
And I think very interesting to compare it against what the state comes up with, since the state's last run at it said that the entire North Coast needed 200 units. I mean, it was just absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, that was the first, that's one of the reasons that we've pushed to go ahead and do our own study, even though the state's gonna do one. Yeah, they said, I think it was.
On any Friday, we could walk into Fred Meyer's and say, hi, who would need housing? And we'd walk out with two names.
It was one that they clearly, the analysis missed the point on the ground for our communities on the coast.
I would say that all tourism communities have had a time raking that report through the polls because of the lack of second home, vacation rental, et cetera, not being included in that. And
It's just so different here.
Yes.
How they're stuff here.
Boxes and counting humans, there's plenty of boxes for all the humans.
I will say, if you on that report.
I hope they got it right. They got it right. I just don't trust them to get it right. There's some great people there in conversations I had following that study. They just scratched their head with, they didn't know how they were gonna do it. And they actually did make an amendment, which didn't really get any better. And they tried to get it right. So
220. So.
yeah. It was like, seriously, because we've already counted, you know, so. I think it'll be good for us to have a more detailed data analysis specific to Tillamook County that allows you all to dive in and make decisions.
Well, I think that kind of wraps up our day or our meeting. Is there anybody wanting to make public comment?
Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas.
Love it.
There you go.
And as a reminder, again, just we're gonna cement this in your brain. February or January 14th, and it says at TBCC, not here at the port. It is on the. So we will be.
Of the advice.
Yes. And if you could provide the room number, so I'm just really the big room upstairs.
I've actually got my whole thing to go over to the community college to get that all locked down right now, which is why I didn't say anything about it at the beginning of the meeting.
You have it on the agenda.
I do, I did.
Notice the change.
I'm going to trust that all is in place. I'm dropping off the check essentially, so.
Perfect. So we will see you after the holidays. Very Merry Christmas. See you next year.
Thank you.